Okay, welcome to Song of Solomon. We're nearly to the end of the whole book this time. We're looking at chapter 8, verses 6 and 7. This is considered by some people to be the climax of the book, the most thrilling and exciting set of verses of the entire book. And so here's what it says. Just this one screen, it's very short. It says, "Put me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm. For love is as strong as death. Jealousy is as severe as Sheol. Its flashes are flashes of fire, the very flame of the Lord. Many waters cannot quench love, nor will rivers overflow it. If a man were to give all the riches of his house for love, it would be utterly despised." Okay, so let's talk about several things here. First thing I'll say before we even move on is people are uncertain about whether this is the man speaking to the woman or the woman speaking to the man. But I don't think it makes a lot of difference. Either one makes sense because it's something that's true of the relationship together. Either one of them could be saying this to the other and it would make sense. Okay, so here's the 5 things I would look at. Number 1, the seal. So let's come back and look at the seal. Put me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm. So the idea of a seal was that a king or somebody else somebody rich enough to do this wanted to send a message or a letter, and they would seal the letter to show that this really came from them. So the way this was done in fairly recent times is that you take a wax impression and you have like a special seal with a special design on it. You put it in the wax and then you put it across the mouth of an envelope, the opening to an envelope, so that it can't be opened without breaking the seal. And that way, when you get the sealed envelope with the mark of that person's seal on it, you know that it belongs to him and he wrote it and it really came from him. So what this person is saying, whether this is the woman or the man, if it's the woman, she's saying to him, "Put me like a seal on your heart. Mark yourself as belonging to me. Mark yourself as being mine. Put me like a seal on your arm." Or it could be him saying to her, "Put me like a seal on your heart. Mark yourself as belonging to me." So there's a lot in this passage about a kind of a possessiveness to love, but a good possessiveness, not a bad possessiveness. Here's the passage that out of the whole book really emphasizes that love is just between two people exclusively. And that's partly what this is saying. Make me a seal, put me as a seal on your heart. Mark it so that your heart belongs to me and me only, that I'm sort of the one it's for and from. And seal on your heart and seal on your arm probably means the seal on your heart probably means that it's everything that you are inwardly, and the seal on your arm probably means that it's a seal on everything you do outwardly. The arm represents your strength or your actions or the things you do. So in everything you think and are inwardly, in everything that you do outwardly, mark yourself as belonging to me. Second thing to notice is the power of love. Okay, this says love is as strong as death. Jealousy is as severe as Sheol. And then later on it says it's a fire, and it says many waters cannot quench love. So here's the thing about death and Sheol and many waters. It's not saying somehow that if you have human love for somebody that you will come back as a ghost or a zombie if you die. It's not saying that it's stronger than death in that sense. It's talking about death and Sheol as forces or principles which govern all of life. In the context in which this was written, back in the culture in which this was written, death and Sheol weren't just things that happened. They sort of represented demonic powers. They sort of represented the force of death. So you should think of death here as being personified, almost being given a personality, as being capital D death. Love is as strong as death with a capital D. Jealousy is as severe as Sheol with a capital S. The grave is what that means. And later, even when it says many waters, in that time period, and you can see this all the way through the Old Testament, many waters is often symbolic of the chaos and the evil and the wickedness and the decay that happens around us. And God acts to restrain the many waters. Many waters, they're thinking about waters that are sort of overflowing their bounds, an ocean, a tidal wave coming in, or a river overflowing its bounds and flooding the whole country. And this is saying even many waters can't quench love. Rivers can't overflow it. They can't put out the flame, which is love. So the idea here is that love is being compared to the forces, the strongest forces in the world, and the forces of destruction and chaos, the force of death, the force of the grave, the force of the waters of chaos, or whatever else you want to think about it. It's saying that love is stronger than all of those. Love has more power than all of those. So the love here is capital L, love, just like those things are capital D, death. It's saying love is stronger than that. Jealousy is interesting. Oh, that's my next point. Notice jealousy. This is interesting that it talks about jealousy. Jealousy is as severe as Sheol. That's parallel to the line before it. So love is as strong as death, just as jealousy is as severe as Sheol. So jealousy here is the jealousy of love. It's not a bad jealousy. Sometimes in Scripture, the word jealousy is used for something bad. It's used for envy and sort of getting petty and insecure and being afraid of losing something. But sometimes it's used in a positive sense. For example, God says, I am a jealous God. He says one time, my name is jealous, and I'm a jealous God. And he explains, I'm jealous for you. What he means is, I'm not going to let you go. I'm not going to let you wander off to other gods. I'm going to chase you down if necessary to bring you back. Again, it's a kind of a possessiveness, but it's a good possessiveness. He's saying, I am going to not ever let go of you or just act as though my relationship to you does not matter to me, because it does. And this is saying jealousy in that positive sense, the jealousy that is the love that won't let go of somebody. The word severe can be translated cruel or ruthless, but it can also be translated in a way that's kind of parallel to strong. It's like being strong. It can mean severe in the sense of being relentless and tenacious. It never gives up. It never gets worn out or never gets defeated. So jealousy is going to hold on no matter what. And so this is saying love is so strong that no matter what happens, it will encounter any obstacle and overcome it. Okay, let's see. Unquenchable fire. The next image is fire. Its flashes of love and jealousy are flashes of fire, the very flame of the Lord. Many waters cannot quench love, nor will rivers overflow it. So the fire of love is like a flame that even a river overflowing it won't put it out. It's still going. It's still there. It's still unstoppable. Now, when this says the very flame of the Lord, that's really interesting for a reason you might not have noticed. And that's that the Lord has never been mentioned by name in this book until now. The word Jehovah or Yahweh or never occurs in this book until here. And even here is just a little suffix. It takes the word flame and puts like Yah at the end of it. So it could mean, some scholars think this just means not the flame of the Lord, but just simply a godlike love, a divine love. Or a divine-like love. But I think if it is deliberately pointing to the Lord, it's really significant. It's like up till now, the focus has been on human love, human love, human love. And then they get to here and they start talking about human love at its fullest, at its richest, at its most committed. And they say, actually, that has a divine source. That's kind of supernatural. It's saying when we face death, when we face destruction, we face the grave, we face the many waters, all the obstacles that come against love. Love is so strong. It's actually not just our passion, our fire there. God is in it. It's actually the flame of God. It's actually the work of God in our lives. It's there. So this is saying all this stuff we've been talking, you didn't know we were talking about God's work, but it really was God's work. You didn't know we were talking about the supernatural directly at all, but even human love is actually supernatural in some sense. It's something that God gives and inspires and keeps going. And many waters cannot quench it. The idea here is that no matter what obstacles there might be, they can't get in the way of this. No matter what rivers might come along, if it's real love and if it's really from God and if it's really what it's supposed to be, it can't be defeated. And then finally, there's just, seems a little anticlimactic, but there's a statement at the end, which I think of the man as saying. It says, if a man were to give all the riches of his house for love, it would be utterly despised. So what he's saying is, love is not only powerful, it's so desirable. It is so worth it. He says, you could, if you could give all the riches of your house for love, it would be not even close to worth enough. So partly this is saying you can't buy love, but partly this is saying that if you could, it would be absolutely worth it. That love is so much more important that you would be worth losing everything to have love. As a matter of fact, so by it would be utterly despised, it means the riches would be utterly despised. The giving of the riches would be utterly not measuring up to the value of love. It would be just a drop in the bucket compared to what love would actually mean. So the picture here is this amazing, resounding picture of love as being incredibly strong, incredibly important, incredibly resilient. Now, let's talk for a little bit with something we started the whole series with. Let's talk about different ways that people interpret this book. One way that people interpret this book, the sort of the most traditional view, is that it's all about Solomon. Another way is that there's the shepherd hypothesis, which is about Solomon and also about a shepherd. And the third way is that it's an anthology. So let me come back and revisit those a little bit here because they come out clearly here. Let's first of all talk about the shepherd hypothesis, which is the most interesting. The shepherd hypothesis says, it supposes, it's a hypothesis, nobody's sure of this. They say maybe this whole song is a love triangle between the woman and Solomon and her shepherd lover, her shepherd beloved. And that what you see in the book is that she, from the beginning, loved her shepherd. But then Solomon came along and wooed her away, or maybe just commanded her to go with him, carried her off to his palace. And that the middle part of the book is all about that. And when she has this dream sequence and she's missing her beloved, she's missing the shepherd. It's not Solomon that she's missing, it's the shepherd she's missing. And she's separated from him. And then in chapter 8, she comes back to him, leaves Solomon and comes back to the shepherd. She leaves being a princess in Israel and comes back to the shepherd. And that's where you say, who is this coming up from the wilderness? It used to be Solomon, but now it's her. And she's leaning on my arm. And look, there's where we were, and there's where we were. And then they say to each other, put me like a seal over your heart. Don't let anything get in the way, because love is stronger than any obstacle that comes along, even if that obstacle is the king, even if that obstacle is somebody with great riches, because a man can give all the riches of his house for love. It wouldn't matter. The love we have is far more important. And that's kind of a rousing story. The only reason I'm not sure of that is that so much of it is just based on supposition. There's nowhere that the song explicitly says that there are two different characters here and that this is what's going on. So it may or may not be true, I'm not sure. But if so, that's the meaning it would have. The second possibility is that this is the traditional view, that this is all about Solomon. And this is Solomon's love story. But in that case, you'd have a similar picture. It would be that in the middle of the book, there's a focus on Solomon's pomp and glory and majesty and wealth. But by the end of the book, we're recognizing that it's the quiet, gentle shepherdliness of Solomon and his bride that really makes the difference. And that it's Solomon who says, I have all these riches, but that doesn't mean anything to me. What means something to me is having your love. What means something to me is you. And I have all these concubines and wives, but they don't mean anything to me. What means something to me is you. I want you to put me like a seal over your heart. Or maybe she says to him, I want you to put me like a seal over your heart. And it's his coming to recognize the vital importance of commitment to this one woman and her commitment to him. And that could be what this is about. If it's an anthology, which is the way I lean, then what you've actually got is several separate songs that don't automatically stick together like a plot, but they've been edited together by whoever put this together. They've been sort of put together like a performance, like a musical performance with lots of different songs from different people. And we're supposed to see the connections between them. And in that case, it's a little bit like the shepherd hypothesis. We're supposed to see that sometimes love takes the form of a king coming out of the wilderness and having his bride, but sometimes it takes the form of a shepherd. And regardless, what everybody's agreeing on here is, again, that love is what matters. That love's more powerful than all these other things. That love's more important than all these other things. And nothing else is nearly as important, and nothing else can overcome it. No matter what obstacles you have, no matter what gets in the way, if it's real love, it's worth it, and it will not be quenched. It'll keep on keeping on. It will be there. So this is actually a cool passage in every way. What's the meaning for human love? Well, I've sort of talked about it. This is one of the passages that really focuses on the meaning for human love, and not just on the words they say to each other in their terms of endearment, but on the value of love. It's basically the only place in the book where the book steps back and says, why is this so important? And it says several things. It talks about the connection between love and commitment, between jealousy and love, between putting yourself like a seal on somebody's heart and love. It talks about love versus the other powers, love versus death, and love versus the grave, and love versus the many waters. It talks about love versus obstacles, that many waters can't quench it. And it talks about love being better than everything else, even all the riches that a man has. And so it talks about the vital importance of a good love relationship. But what does this mean for divine love? What does it mean for our relationship with God? And here's where I want to close, of course. The interesting thing is that it means God wants us to be in a love relationship with him, not just to obey him and he blesses. It's easy to get into sort of a religious only mindset where you think of God as a cosmic vending machine, and then my job is to serve and obey, and his job is to bless and make my life better. And it's sort of like a transaction. I do what I'm supposed to, he does what he promises to, and everything's fine. That misses so much about what the Christian relationship is about. God is wooing us, calling us to be in a love relationship with him. So first of all, he wants us not just to obey him. Obedience is fine, but that's not what he's after primarily. He wants us to love him. What's the greatest commandment? It's to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul and strength. That's what he's always been after, is our hearts, not just our actions, not just our sacrifice, but our hearts. And that's something he makes very clear. And it's easy for us to miss, but it's important to understand. God wants us to have this kind of commitment to him. Not, you're God and I'm human, so I guess I'd better obey, but I love you and I want nothing more than to be walking with you, walking in your will. And he wants us to see the depth of his love for us. He doesn't just bless us because we obey and it's a reward. He blesses us because he loves us and cares about us as a father would his children, or as a husband would his bride. He cares about how we're doing, and he wants us to see the depth of his love for us. And that's so vital. 2 verses I want to close with from the New Testament. One I shared a little bit from the other day. It's something I've been thinking about over the last couple of weeks. As always, what I'm doing is thinking about things in my own life recently and how they connect. This was 1 John 4:16 through 19. Notice the importance of love here and how if we understand the love of God, it changes our lives. It says, we have come to know and have believed the love which God has for us. He's talking there about the basic process of getting saved. I came to believe and understand that this is what the case is, that God loves me so much. God is love. The one who abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. To see the love of God, to abide in the love of God, to live in the love of God, that's to be with God. And then also, but also abiding in love here means that I begin to have love for others. In 1 John, there's really no distinction. There's a little bit of a distinction, but there's a complete seamless connection between seeing God's love for me and beginning to love others. To let God's love into my life lets in capital L love. It lets in this way of looking at things, which makes me love everyone because he loves them, which makes me live in love because he's that way. And this is the danger, the risk of letting God's love fill my heart, is who knows what I'll end up doing to love others, because it'll be there in my heart motivating me. And that's why it says the one who abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. By this, love is perfected with us. We begin to not only see the love of God to us, but it begins to fill us and be part of our relation to everybody else. He says, so that we may have confidence in the day of judgment, because as he is, so also are we in this world. He's not saying just we have confidence because we know we're forgiven. He says we have confidence because we see that he's transforming us and we're beginning to live the way he would live. We're seeing the love of God in our lives. We're seeing ourselves do things and going, oh, wow, that was God loving them through me. And then he says there's no fear in love. Perfect love casts out fear, because fear involves punishment. The one who fears is not perfected in love. But as we grow as Christians, as we grow in seeing the love of God for us, and as we grow in having the love of God for us for others, there's no room for fear. There's no place for fear. Instead, there's just love. And then at the end, he reminds us, but remember, we only love because he first loved us. God's love to us is what starts the whole process. And then the Christian life is, in one sense, simply a matter of growing deeper and deeper in our understanding of the love of God in us and for others. And then Ephesians 3 was something I was looking at this week. Paul says, for this reason, I bow my knees before the Father, and he explains how he's praying for them. And then starting about verse 16 or 17, he says, I pray that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ, which surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled up to all the fullness of God. He says, as I pray for you all to grow in your faith, as I pray for you all to do well in the faith, one thing I keep praying is that you're already rooted and grounded in love because you've been saved. You're already rooted and grounded in love because you've recognized who Christ is and what he's done for you. But I pray you'd begin to comprehend with all the rest of the saints all together just how broad and long and high and low God's love goes. He says stretches up, side to side and top to bottom. As far as you can go, God's love is there. Christ's love is there. And then he says, come to think of it, It's not just that he's that big, it's that the love of Christ surpasses knowledge. He says to know the love of Christ, which actually is beyond our knowing. It's so big and so incredible. And then he says, if you do this, you'll be filled up to all the fullness of God. In other words, if we want to have our lives full of God, if we want to have our lives full of walking with God, that happens when we are full of the love of Christ to us and through us. That happens when we begin to see how great the love of Christ is. That's what fills us up. That's what makes our lives what they are. Okay, so that's this. I think that's what this passage is pointing to in a spiritual sense. That kind of powerful love that overcomes any other obstacle. And I love this passage. I'm sorry to move on from it, but we're going to. Next week, I think we'll be doing the very last of the series. So I'll see you then.